Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally touches every single one of us at some point, and that is adversity. But we're not just going to focus on the hard times. We're looking at what happens after. So let's just get right into it. We're going on a bit of a journey today, starting with a really powerful human story, and then zooming all the way in on the microscopic neuroscience of how our brains are actually physically built to handle stress. We're going to uncover how the very stories we tell ourselves can quite literally change the structure of our minds.
Section 1. Defying the odds. To really ground this science in reality, I want to share the lived experience of Caden Zagendorf. At just 18 years old, Caden, who's a psychology student, aged out of the foster care system. Now, for most of us, turning 18 is this huge milestone of freedom, right? But for youth exiting foster care, it is often more like being pushed off a cliff without a safety net. The statistics they face are honestly just grim. We're talking about dramatically heightened risks of homelessness, incarceration, and even early death. Looking at it on paper, you'd think this path is almost engineered for failure. But Caden didn't just survive this massive transition, they thrived.
And what's absolutely fascinating is how Caden framed that entire experience. They wrote this: "My resilience wasn't just about survival, it was about defying the odds, embracing healing, and reclaiming my story." I want you to really think about that last part, reclaiming my story. It is such a crucial psychological trigger because it shows us that resilience, well, it isn't passive. It's a highly active, totally intentional choice to take control of your own narrative. But that brings us to a pretty big question. What exactly is resilience? Which brings us to Section 2, the ordinary magic of resilience.
For the longest time, developmental psychologists would look at people who survived terrible, unimaginable things and assume they must have some kind of special, invisible armor. But then, psychologist Anne Maston completely flipped our understanding on its head. She coined this amazing term, ordinary magic. She argued that resilience isn't rare at all. It's actually just the natural outcome of our healthy, basic human adaptational and protective systems operating under stress. The huge takeaway here is that human beings are fundamentally biologically wired to adapt and survive. It's not magic in some supernatural superhero sense. It's just the beautiful, everyday magic of human biology doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Let's just compare how this completely shifts our basic assumptions. The old view treated resilience like this rare genetic superpower. You either had the gene or you didn't, and if you didn't, well, tough luck. But the new science, it proves that resilience is a built-in feature. It's accessible to literally everyone. You don't need a cape, you just need your basic adaptational systems to be supported. And this was actually proven in a really famous way by developmental psychologist Emmy Werner. She ran this landmark Kauai study, where she tracked nearly 700 children over 4 entire decades. And what she found was incredible. A full 1/3 of highly vulnerable, at-risk children grew into well-adjusted, completely stable adults. And do you know what the single most common protective factor was that triggered this ordinary magic? Just having one caring, supportive caregiver. That is literally it. Just one stable relationship was enough to spark a child's natural resilience.
Section 3. Rewiring the brain.
Okay, so if resilience is a built-in feature, where exactly is it? How does the brain physically take a hit of severe stress and then just bounce back? Well, welcome to the wildly fascinating world of neurobiology, and specifically neuroplasticity. This is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming brand new neural connections throughout your life in response to stress and learning. Think of your brain like a super dense forest. Every time you have a thought or react to stress, you're walking down a trail. If you walk that same trail of anxiety or fear every single day, it becomes this deep, wide, easy-to-walk road. But neuroplasticity means you can choose to forge a totally new path. Sure, it's going to be really hard at first, pushing through all that thick brush, but eventually the old fearful road overgrows and the new resilient trail becomes your automatic default route. And the crazy thing is, we can actually see this happening in real time under a microscope. Back in 2012, a study by Russo and his colleagues found that when we recover from stress, our hippocampus, which is the brain center for memory and emotion, actually generates brand new neurons. Then flash forward to a 2019 study by Lorsch, which showed that highly resilient individuals actually have way more activity in their prefrontal cortex during a crisis. That's the part of the brain that handles problem solving and acts like your emotional brakes, keeping you totally regulated. So your brain is quite literally building new hardware to protect you. Section 4. Post-traumatic growth. But we have to ask, what happens when the stress isn't just an everyday challenge, like a bad day at work? What happens when a person faces severe trauma? The kind of event that completely shatters how they see the world. This brings us to a really deep phenomenon documented by researchers Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, known as post-traumatic growth. Now, I want to be incredibly clear here because this gets misunderstood all the time. The crucial point is this: true growth does not come from the trauma itself. The trauma is absolutely not a gift, it is an injury. The growth comes entirely from the grueling, agonizing psychological struggle to construct meaning in the aftermath. It's that active, really difficult cognitive effort to rebuild a shattered worldview that creates the growth, not the awful event that caused the shattering in the first place. To actually measure this transformation, Tedeschi and Calhoun developed the post-traumatic growth inventory, and they mapped it out across 5 core domains. People who go through this intense psychological struggle often report developing deeper, much more compassionate relationships with others. They start seeing totally new possibilities for their lives that they had never even considered before. They discover this profound sense of personal strength, realizing, hey, if I survived that, I can survive anything. They also frequently experience spiritual changes or massive shifts in their core belief systems. And finally, they gain a deeply renewed appreciation for just the simple fact of being alive.
Which brings us to our final section, practical tools for resilience.
So knowing that resilience is this ordinary biological magic and that our brains are physically capable of rewiring themselves even after severe trauma, how do we actually get in there and actively participate in the process? Well, let's look at some highly actionable, science-backed tools. First up, mindfulness. Studies actually show that regular mindfulness physically increases the density of gray matter in the brain regions associated with self-awareness and emotional regulation. Next, physical exercise. When you get up and move your body, you release something called BDNF. It's a protein that basically acts like Miracle-Gro for your brain, supporting all that new neural growth. Third, structured therapies, things like CBT and EMDR. These explicitly use your neuroplasticity to safely rewrite how your brain responds to those traumatic triggers. And finally, honestly, just learning new skills. Whether it's picking up a new language or starting a random hobby, you are forcing your brain to lay down new neural networks, which keeps it flexible, adaptable, and ready for whenever adversity strikes.
We kicked off this explainer talking about Kaden Sagendorf, who made the very active choice to reclaim their story. You are not just some passive victim of your biology or your circumstances. Your brain is physically built to adapt, to rewire, and to grow through adversity. That's not just a nice thought, it is a biological fact. So knowing that the narrative you construct literally physically shapes the neural pathways of your mind, what story are you going to choose to tell yourself today?